So, Jan, great to have you here on this, well, virtual meeting, virtual panel. Thanks for being with us. And we would like to get your view on a few aspects of the publishing culture, in particular also in the BPM community. And one of the aspects that play a role there is, well, the role of those different types of venues that we have, starting with workshops. We have at the BPM conference, we have a lot of workshops, then the conference itself. But of course, we also know that there are a couple of journals that play quite an important role in our field. So how do you see the role of those different types of venues and how they, well, fit together when it comes to publishing in BPM?
Yeah, thanks, Matthias. Thanks for having me. First of all, it's a bit of a pity that we cannot get together physically, but I can see you at least. That's a bit better than what I usually get here. So yeah, let's try to make the most out of it. So as some of the people may know, that I'm usually working within the information systems field, which is obviously related and very closely related to BPM, but it also has some different aspects of the publishing culture. And before this background, let me answer this. So in most of the areas that I'm working, the only publications that really count are journal papers. Now, we could talk about whether that's the right thing to do, or how we rate these journals and how we rank them and so forth. But let's forget about that for a second, and think about, in a world where only journal publications matter, what is then the role of a BPM conference or a BPM conference workshop or other types of satellite workshops as publications, the role of proceedings or books in which they get published, and whether or not these counts. Now, my view on these matters is that, first of all, conferences are incredibly important. And I think now during COVID, we notice how their absence makes us notice how important they really are as places where we can meet, gather, socialize, exchange our ideas. And I think that's the key role, and not so much as publications, because the one thing I can still access now while I'm sitting in my home office here are publications. And whether they end up as a PDF in a Springer book or on a web page or in a journal don't really matter all that much. Yeah. So the conference is what's missing, and the exchange and the gathering of friends and ideas, that's really what's missing. So in my view, that is really important when it comes to conference. So they have a very important role to play, and that we should look after them, we should boost them, we should do a lot of these things, but make it part of the publishing game, not so sure. Right. And from what I can see, also looking into the computer science and informatics disciplines, it's actually not all that dissimilar from my vantage points. A lot of these communities and groups and institutions, they talk about journals as well, not so much as about conference and workshops. But let me comment on what I think the role of conferences and workshops are. So conference, as I said, meeting places. We also need a place where some of the ideas that are presented are being made persistent. Yeah, so, as a PDF, if you want in a published proceedings, I think the key thing here is to remember whether or not the idea is then copyrighted to a publisher or not. Now, in my field, a lot of the conference have moved away from a publisher like Springer, like IEEE, like ICM, that assign copyright to them, and instead have either self-managed publisher or publishers where we don't assign copyright, so that the ideas in the papers can further be developed or just resubmitted to a journal, yeah, without any 30% difference, of course. So the second point I wanted to make there is workshops. To me, they're really important. I find that most of the good papers have been workshopped, quite literally in that sense. So to me, the role of workshops is I can take very rough ideas. I can take an idea, I can take data, I can take an approach, a new algorithm, a new method, and test it and subject it to a very close community of peers that are really working in that narrow field, and expose that idea and get feedback on it. I think that's the role of these types of venues. And again, in my experience, if that workshop has a published proceedings, I think that's actually detrimental. I like going to the workshops where I don't even get the PDFs anymore, right? I just want to go there. I want to expose my idea, get feedback on it. And I don't want to see that PDF anywhere because I want to work on that further and maybe submit it to a conference and so forth. So I think for workshops, proceedings as a part of a measurable quantity of in a publication game is actually a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe just one quick follow-up here. In some fields, we see that also conferences move from this one-shot publication model more to a model where also revisions are invited, right? Which of course gets closer to this,
Yeah.
well, common process that is followed by many journal publications. Would you see that as a good trend, or would you say that is actually pretty natural if you consider conference as publication outlets? And would you see that that also changes what kind of work and how people submit to those venues and how they prepare, let's say, their research
Yeah.
for publication?
I'm gonna tackle this a little bit from a side angle. So I think at the moment the review revision process at the conference are reasonably meaningless. It means that we have a very good review process. In my view, sometimes we go too deep into reviewing an initial submission. In my field, we have 3 reviewers, an AE, and a track chair. So 5 sets of comments on a paper where for the revision we get a month and no one looks at it. Yeah, or very few people look at it again. So, that to me went a little bit overboard in establishing the quality of an initial submission. And then we couple that with a very meager, minimal evaluation of the revision. We want a response document, we want a rebuttal, we want a revision, and some guy glances over it and says, that's fine. If you continue this way, then we may as well not do it. Yeah. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say, I think that especially in computer science, there are some more innovative and I think just plainly better models out there. So I think there are some conferences, I think it's VLDB, that allows submission of a paper at any time up to a deadline when it's ready, and then it gets evaluated and it has very clear revisions, expectations, and timelines, and it gets checked again. And everything up to a particular timeline, I think, then can be presented at that conference. So I think that's an interesting model. The other very interesting model that I've seen is, I think, in the EMISA forum, organized by the German Society for Informatics, GI. I think they had an opposite conference model where if you had an interesting journal paper coming out, you could present that at a conference after it got published. And that, I think, is a really good idea in helping you to present your latest ideas and make them available and sort of market them a little bit better, socialize the ideas better. These are interesting models, I think, and I'd like to see not just BPM, any conference really experiment with some of these ideas and move away from this. We need to make sure that the review is as tight as possible or as hard as possible, still within 3 months, and everything has to be original and new and so forth. If we go by this idea that we want to have a place where people can gather socially, thematically, exchange ideas and benefit from that, and move a little bit away from this is in a publication that counts towards a PhD, towards my career, then I think we give ourselves room of trying alternative formats that some people are already doing, and I think they're all incredibly interesting.
All right, thanks. That's a call for action.
Yeah, it is a call for action, absolutely.